Welcome to Contempo. I am your host, Roberta Markbright. Thank you so much for being with us and for sharing with us. And please help me welcome our very, very special guest, Tim Wolf, who is the candidate for U.S. Congress in the 9th Congressional District. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
We're thrilled to have you here.
Okay, well, I'm very happy to be here and have an opportunity to tell my potential constituents a little bit about myself.
That's wonderful. Well, let's do that. I guess the first question might be, why are you running for this office against an incumbent?
Okay, well, I'm running because the country's in a financial mess. If you remember, about a year ago now, there was this debt crisis and spending limit, and I was listening to that, and I really just came to the conclusion that there aren't enough people in Washington who are serious about making tough financial decisions. And so I said, this isn't right. So I kind of looked to see what was going on. I've never run for office before, and I found out there was this thing called redistricting. And I would now become part of the 9th District. I'm currently in the 10th District. Bob Dole is my congressman.
Oh.
And I found out Jan Schakowsky would be my congressman, who's on the opposite end of the spectrum from where I'm at. I'm a conservative. She's much more liberal. She's for bigger government. I'm for smaller government. And I said, well, geez, who's going to run against her? And I looked around and found out that nobody was going to stand up against her. And that's probably because she'd won by large margins in the past. But I couldn't let that stand. I decided I was going to run, and I was just going to stand up for the people of the 9th District, and hopefully after this little interview, there might be a few people who might say, I think I want to help that guy out. I think, he's got my best interest at heart, and I do.
Yes, you do. You're a man of the people.
Yes.
Now, what is your profession now? Because that is very important to why you're running in a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm a CPA, stands for Certified Public Accountant. It's one of the best known or most trusted professions there are. I've been a CPA for about 30 years. I have my own tax and accounting practice in Mount Prospect, where I've been for about 20 years. And so I know about budgets, I know about the economy, I know about investing and all these things, and so I have an idea of where we're at, where we're going, and it doesn't look good.
Do you think what we're going through here in this district is a microcosm of what's happening in the bigger areas, really the whole nation, if you will?
Well, certainly this is a big area. This is a new district. I might have alluded to that a little bit earlier. And this district covers a lot of territory. Maybe we can talk about the specifics a little bit later on, but there's problems here, housing problems, people without jobs, educational systems overcrowded, numerous languages being spoken, and how do we handle that in our educational system? Energy prices are high. As a matter of fact, energy prices in our area are probably one of the highest in the country. I'm from Bloomington, Illinois, and I was just down to see my parents a little bit ago, and the gas price was about 60 cents lower per gallon in Bloomington than it was here. So, why is that? Certainly taxes are part of it, but it was a shocker. So
you were really surprised.
But so, point being, it's very expensive to live here, and if people can't find jobs, that's why they're moving out.
What is the role of a congressperson?
Okay, there are really two basic roles of a congressman. One is to pass laws. Congress is the only body who has the right to pass a law. Now, when I say Congress, hopefully most people realize that that's the Senate and the House of Representatives. I'm running for a spot in the House of Representatives. So a congressman passes laws, and then a congressman is, I like to say, the financial steward of our country.
How do you mean?
They're the people who pass the budget, determine what the revenue needs to be to pay our bills. And you might guess that with 15 going on $16 trillion in debt, Congress isn't doing a very good job at that.
That's for sure. How is it that the state of Illinois has gotten to be in the fix it's in? Is there an answer to that?
Well, I think it's probably the same answer as as in many respects the same as the United States. We've got politicians who won't stand up and make the tough decisions. We've got people are becoming too used to relying on the system, whether it be help when they're unemployed or Social Security, these types of things. Not saying those are wrong, certainly those are good things. But as a reliance is built up, people might have a little less initiative or might, it's just not good to have a dependence, and that's what's happened. I think though in Illinois you've got another factor in that you've got a few people like a Mike Madigan who really control what's going on in Congress, in the Illinois legislature. Nothing can get past that one person. So the political scene might be actually a little bit tougher from that perspective, but many of the problems are the same.
It sounds like what I'm getting from this, they're not representing people, and that's what you want to do. Absolutely,
absolutely. Even though this is a federal position, the congressperson should stand up for the things that are going on in the state as well as at the federal level. One of the problems I have in looking at the congressman that's in place right now, Jan Schakowsky, is where was she when these pensions started to spiral out of control? What did she say when we found out that Mayor Daley had a special loophole that he was able to take advantage of? What has she said all along as the budget deficit's begun to spiral out of control and we're losing jobs? We're losing jobs at the state level, we're losing jobs at the federal level, and she's talking about other issues. And I think that's part of the reasons I'm running is we need to focus in on the important things. Those other issues that she talks about, women's health care is her primary issue. That's a wonderful issue, but that's not the issue that's going to get us back on track. And that's the issue she wants to keep talking about. I don't want to not talk about that, but I want to talk about the budget. I want to talk about jobs, and the things we need to do to get jobs growing again.
That's so important. Well, in other words, she's neglecting everything else and putting all her energy into women's health care, which, as you said, is important, but the other areas which are so important are being neglected.
I feel so. I think the other area that needs to be brought out, especially at this time as the election approaches, is she's interested in Washington. She's been there for 14 years, and she's interested in getting Barack Obama elected. I'm interested in getting the other person elected. But her focus, I don't think, is on the 9th District. It's on other places and other people. And I hope that the people of the 9th District will at least think about that. Is she really spending the time that she should be focusing in on the issues of the 9th District and not on, working with Nancy Pelosi to get, things accomplished that she wants to get accomplished, which aren't the most important things.
It's amazing that these other things are neglected. You've talked about having a flat tax. Now explain what you mean by that. You've said that the way we tax people is very complicated right now. Explore that.
Okay. Well, on the flat tax, that's not quite what I said, but just to start over though, the tax code is probably about this thick. And then the regulations, which are interpretations of the code, are even thicker. Very cumbersome, very hard to understand. And it turns out that the people who really can understand and take advantage of those tax codes and regulations are the people who make a lot of money. There's nothing wrong with making a lot of money. There's nothing wrong with being a big company. There's nothing wrong with taking advantage of the tax code because that's why people put them there. But the point is, we're at a point in time where I think we've got to simplify things, we've got to quit giving people breaks, we've got to say, okay, here's the rules of the road as far as taxes go. We're going to make it simple, we're going to make it fair, and then businesses will understand what the rules are, what their taxes are going to be, because their taxes are a big part of their profit and loss statement. So they've got to know, how to handle those.
Well, go ahead, I'm sorry.
But as far as the flat tax itself, the flat tax is saying there will be certain deductions, like if you're married, you get so many deductions. Maybe there's deduction for, let's say charitable contributions, but they're limited. There's not as many as there are now. And then it's just a flat rate, 17%, 19%, people have talked about. I'm not for the flat tax, though, because I think it really will put an undue burden on people at the lower end of the spectrum, because they're going to be paying more taxes than the people at the higher levels. Additionally, people right now at the lower end of the tax brackets are getting a lot of tax breaks. And so to go from maybe getting refunds to having to pay taxes is going to be too much of a shock to the system. Whatever tax system we come up with, it needs to be simple and it needs to be fair. And I think it's going to take several years to get that into place. It's not something that's going to say, okay, we have an election for 2013, by January of 2014, we're going to have a new tax system.
It doesn't work like that.
It's not going to work that way. The tax system is very complicated. There's no way that we're going to be able to put the tax returns on a postage stamp, or not a postage stamp, but like a small, card or something like that. There are just too many things. Maybe for the taxpayer who has a job, maybe a little bit of interest income, maybe you could do that. But there are businesses out there that have, what they call flow-through income from other entities. There's tax credits, there's different types of businesses, there's trusts. There's just a lot of things going on out there. And to just say, we're going to simplify it just like that, it's not going to happen.
Well, I apologize for saying you were for the
Well,
flat.
no, that's fine.
You have said that wealthy people or people who do own corporations, they pay a very high tax. According to the media, they don't. Is that?
Well, I'm a CPA and I do tax returns.
Okay.
And I would say that my clients, I have clients at all spectrums. I would say I don't have a heavily weighted practice towards those people who make multi-millions, but certainly I have some clients who make millions of dollars and they pay a lot of tax. One of the problems we talk about taxes, I have a tendency to get too bogged down and get technical, so I'll try not to do that. But people definitely pay a lot in taxes. And so when somebody comes along and says, this person doesn't pay a lot of taxes, and they don't know the issues behind the situation, it frustrates me. But I will guarantee you that most people who make a lot of money also pay a lot of taxes. And to expect them to pay more, when you look at how much, let's say the top 10% of the taxpayers pay, they pay maybe 50% or more than 50% of the tax.
It's a lot.
So, and then the bottom 50% aren't paying anything. So to say that one segment has to keep paying while the other segment doesn't pay anything is not fair. We need to be fair. That's why I say we need to get a simpler system, a more equitable system, so everybody knows the rules of the road. What
is a loophole? And they can be a good thing, right?
They can be a good thing. The thing is they've gotten out of control, I think. What a loophole is basically it's a subsidy for a person or a business, and usually those loopholes are put in place for a particular purpose. Let's just take a simple example is what's called the Section 179 deduction. You buy a $100,000 computer, okay? How fast do you depreciate that? Because the IRS code doesn't allow you to take a deduction all in year one. Well, somewhere along the line, people said, well, maybe we should be able to write off $20,000 of that in the first year. And then maybe it increased to $50,000, and now it's, I think, over $200,000. So that's a loophole, but it was designed for a specific purpose. It was designed to get people to start to buy equipment to get the economy moving. People talk about loopholes for the oil and gas companies, which might deal with royalties and how fast you deplete things. Depletion is like depreciation except for natural resources as opposed to physical equipment. So that's generally what a loophole is, a designed subsidy. And Republicans and Democrats have both passed laws putting those loopholes in place. And so let's stop with the oil people are bad and the Republicans are bad because they back the oil people, this, that, and the other. That was yesterday. Today is where we're at. Let's start looking at the code. How can we simplify it, make it easy for everybody, and quit pointing fingers, because if we continue to do that, we're not going to get any place.
Most of the people who are pointing fingers really don't have the facts. You talk about the Buffett rule. What is that?
Okay, the Buffett rule is something that came up, I don't know, maybe about a year ago, where somebody, maybe it was even Warren Buffett, said, well, my secretary pays more in taxes than I do. Well, I'm not saying that's true. I'm not saying it's not true. But it's just like anything else, like I mentioned before. There's a lot of issues behind a person's tax return, or how much tax they end up paying. The thing that aggravates me is somebody goes, geez, a secretary is making less than what is paying less in taxes than what Warren Buffett does here. This is the richest guy in the world, or used to be the richest guy in the world. He's one of the richest guys in the world. And I go, that's aggravating, because first of all, we don't know how much money this person makes. Well, as it turns out, from what I've read and heard, this person makes between $250,000 and $500,000 a year. That's not your average secretary. So right away, the view is distorted, okay? How much stock does this person probably has stock in the company that she's gotten. And she's probably worth everything she's paid, okay? But the point is, people don't know the issues, and to just say X when X may not be true is really unfair. There's always more behind there's always that man behind the curtain. There's always something else that you don't know. And I'm telling you, as a CPA who does tax returns, I think that before we start going off on the Buffett rule, or do people do this or do that, we really need to identify what we're talking about and talk about those issues, as opposed to saying the Republicans are doing this and the Democrats are doing that and they did this.
Well, let's make things clear.
Yeah.
Do you think she's become a public figure? It sounds like it.
You mean Ms. Schakowsky?
Yeah. No. Buffett's secretary.
Well, I think she's become an icon. I mean, I don't know the person's name. I don't know if it's ever been publicized. I don't have any interest in knowing who the person is. But I think this idea of the rich people aren't paying what they're supposed to is a distortion. Because first of all, this person is probably a rich person. So why don't we just, why don't we know the facts? And so it's just the way things have gotten, that politics has gotten such that everybody takes a fact and distorts it and uses it for those purposes. And I'm not going to say that, life happens in that way, but, we hire people to go to Washington or to Springfield to get things accomplished, not to become partisan professional politicians who are making tons of money because they're in those offices.
Do you think that's it might be a kind of hysteria or fear when people start accusing other people with nothing to back it up with?
I think it's just an opportunity to latch on to something that's going to help your team, whether you're Team D or Team R or Team I.
What about Obamacare and the controversy about it?
A lot of controversy. You probably know that the Supreme Court's listened to cases or listened to attorneys for both people for Obamacare, people against Obamacare, and the issue in that case boils down to the constitutionality. And that's why I'm against Obamacare. Is it constitutional? I personally don't think so, because the government doesn't have a right to tell you what to buy, what product or service to buy. So if we say today you have to buy this product or service, then why isn't that tomorrow we're not going to say you have to buy that product or service? And then maybe the day after we're going to say, well, now you have to sell this thing or that thing. Well, where does it stop? I mean, we can just look at anything. We can look at Social Security, we can look at the tax system. The influence of government is not going to get any less. And so to think that the government's going to stop telling you what to do at the healthcare point, I think is kidding yourself. Besides that, I think it's a bad bill. When a representative in Congress, speaking of Nancy Pelosi, tells you you've got to pass the bill to find out what's in it, that's not good. Yes, absolutely. And this bill is thousands of pages long. It affects about a sixth of the economy, they say. So to just ram through some piece of legislation when you don't even know what's in there, just so you can say the Dems chalked one up, that's not good. And there were promises made that weren't carried through.
Yes, yeah.
I think the whole thing is a bad deal, and I think we need to get rid of Obamacare. Congress needs to do their job and help pass laws in conjunction with the states. And let's get everybody covered, or everybody has the opportunity to be covered. We'll talk about how the funding is later. No pre-existing conditions, that's good. There's a lot of good things that Congress wants to accomplish, but doing it through Obamacare or through forced purchasing of health care, where there's penalties on the other side that's going to make you do these things, that's not good. Let me just say the last thing is, if you don't believe me that there aren't penalties out there and the government isn't forcing you to do things, why is the government hiring all these IRS agents to enforce the laws? It sounds to me like a bit of socialism,
Yes.
maybe even further than that, with what the government cracking down, the government being in control. It's very scary, I think.
Yes, it is. A lot of people really resent the fact that they can't choose their own doctors according to this Obamacare. And a lot of people feel that we're moving toward a socialist state and our freedoms will be denied. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've been moving toward socialism for a long time.
We have.
I think that what people need to think about, and maybe they'll just sit down after the interview and think about this. If government continues to grow, we need more taxes, right, to fund that government. And as money goes out of your pocket to pay those taxes, we're losing our freedoms. We're losing our freedoms to take the money that we've earned and do what we want with that money. So there's a direct correlation between bigger government and loss of freedoms. We need to recognize that. We're well on our way to losing all our freedoms. Let's just stop right now and say, wait a minute. We've got this document called a Constitution. It gives us a roadmap of what we need to do. Let's put that in place and let's move forward using that tool that our founders gave us.
What about Medicaid or Medicare and Social Security? These are things that we're frightened about now. There might not be any
Absolutely.
left.
There's a lot of problems there, and it's a problem that's we could have a whole different program on. But we need to reform those systems, because right now, with no reforms, which is what Jan Schakowsky is suggesting we do, what Barack Obama is suggesting we do, that we just continue to fund them, that we don't make any changes to the program, that means death to these programs. Because in 20 to 30 years, these programs are going to be insolvent. There's not going to be the money to pay for them. So we need to do something now. Now, there's a guy named Paul Ryan, who's chairman of the Budget Committee, who came up with his own proposal, came up with his budget proposal, because that's his job. And part of that deals with Medicare and Social Security and Medicaid and those things. And I personally think it's a good start. But whether you like it or not, it's a start. There's a proposal out there. The only thing you hear from the 9th Congressional District Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky is we're balancing the budget on the backs of the poor. It's going to start changing the Medicare as we know it today. We can't do that. We've got to leave it alone. Well, first of all, the people who are 55 and older are not going to be affected. They will get their benefits just as they are today. There are plans in place where you can choose, for example, the Medicare plan as it is today, or a voucher program. The point being, though, is we've got a proposal on the table. It's a reasonable proposal, and why both sides aren't negotiating and saying, let's get something accomplished, because to do nothing is foolish. It means disaster. Let's not finger point, which is what's happening. People, a couple years ago there was the video clip on YouTube about Paul Ryan was pushing Granny off the cliff. Is that what our congressmen do? Is that how people like Jan Schakowsky and Barack Obama negotiate? Whatever gets accomplished by negotiating through intimidation and things like that, nothing gets accomplished, at least nothing on a permanent and sustainable basis. So let's get rid of that stuff. And I'm hoping that the people of this district will hear me talking to you and say, yeah, we need to get away from that. Let's think about it. We've got 5 or 6 months before the election, so I won't ask you to vote for me today, but at least think about it. At least think about the things that are going to get us from point A to point B, not from point A to point minus A. Because that's the direction we're going now. We're going further and further behind. We'll soon be $16 trillion in debt, and it's just accumulating from there.
It's incredible, isn't it? It's unbelievable. Do you know any of the details of Ryan's plan that you could share with us?
Well, as I said, the biggest or most well-known area is in Medicare, where Ryan's proposing that for people who are less than 55, when they get to be the age of Medicare, they'll either choose to go on a voucher system where the government pays them a certain amount of money and then they go out and get their own insurance, or they can take the option of the system as it is now. Social Security is addressed, the age is increased sometime down the road, there's cuts in the budget, not the types of budget cuts I would like to see, but again, it's a starting point. It's a good starting point, but I think we need to go further. Just to kind of add on, maybe going, not trying to get too technical, but I mentioned earlier the Constitution. One of the problems is that Congress has given away their authority to make the laws. They've given it to the executive branch. And the executive branch has just gone wild with EPA and regulations and this, that, and the other. Did you know that the cost of regulations is about $1.75 trillion per year? That's more than the income tax paid by both businesses and individuals. So regulations are paid by businesses. It's not something that people see because it's not on their income tax return, but it's even more than the income tax. So start to think about, geez, not only do businesses pay a lot of income taxes, but then they pay for all these regulations. Well, you know who ends up really paying for it is you and I, because businesses are in business to provide a good or services that we buy or the government buys. And so those costs are going to be passed along. So the more regulation, the more tax, the more cost, the more the effect is on us, the more negative effect.
What is independent energy? What does it mean to be independent, to have independent energy?
Well, I think being energy independent means that we're not relying on other people or other countries for our energy needs, that we're self-sufficient. But there's always going to be international trade, and it might be easier for, say, to buy oil from, let's say, the Middle East into the West Coast as opposed to, let's say, maybe bringing oil or gas, whatever, from Florida all the way up to Washington. There's always going to be international trade. But the point is, we rely on the Middle East, we rely on Venezuela for some of our needs. And not only is this cost more in terms of at the pump, because of insecurities in these regions, but it's also a national security problem. You know, if let's say this last summer there was the possibility of the Iranians blocking the Straits of Hormuz, which is a major oil lane out of the Middle East, if that had been blocked, then the price of gas and oil would go up. Well, we're subject to what's going on over there, so we need to become independent of that situation. We need to start generating our own gas and oil, and we have the resources to do that. If I could just make one other point, we need to, as a country, define what that is and how we're going to get there.
We have to say goodbye. I'm so sorry.
Oh, well, you'll have to ask me back again.
Well, you've got to come back.
I will.
Right?
Very good.
Thank you so much for being with us. We all need to learn from you and to listen to you.
All right, very good.
Thank you for being here.
I appreciate it
and
very
thank
much.
you. And we'll see you next time on Contempo. Thank you so much for sharing. Bye-bye. Finish what you were saying.
I was just saying that with the energy independence, it's